Hey there, welcome to Broaderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. The Last Guest. Have you ever felt like you were being watched? It's an unsettling thought, isn't it? I used to dismiss such feelings as mere paranoia, a trick of the mind fueled by late-night horror movies and too much caffeine. But now, as I sit in my dimly lit living room, clutching this notebook, I can't shake the feeling that something is not right. It all began on a seemingly ordinary night. I had just moved into this small, second-floor apartment on the edge of town, eager for a fresh start. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse, but the air was filled with a peculiar kind of silence that felt almost comforting. I remember the way the shadows danced across the walls, flickering like whispers of a past I was trying to forget. As the clock struck midnight, I was jolted from my thoughts by a faint noise. It sounded like a soft thud echoing through the stillness. My heart raced. I convinced myself it was just the settling of the building or perhaps a stray cat outside. I tried to brush it off and turn back to my book, but my mind wouldn't let it go. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I was plagued by strange dreams, visions of dark figures lurking just beyond the periphery of my consciousness. When I awoke, I felt an oppressive weight in the air, as if the shadows themselves were pressing in, demanding my attention. The next night, I returned home from work, feeling the weight of fatigue on my shoulders. I turned the key in the lock and stepped inside, greeted by the familiar silence. As I settled into my routine, a creeping sense of dread began to invade my thoughts. I dismissed it, attributing it to exhaustion. But then, the noises began again. This time, they were more insistent, soft shuffling, a distant rustle, as if something was moving about in the darkness. I glanced around my apartment, the chill of the evening air wrapping around me like a shroud. My mind raced with possibilities, a thief, a ghost. But I was alone, I had to be. Just then, a cold draft swept through the room, causing the hairs on my arms to stand on end. I noticed something unusual on the floor, a dark stain, like an inky shadow left behind. I knelt to inspect it, the strange scent of damp earth wafting through the air. Was it a trick of the light? My mind questioned. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I was seeing things. But there it was, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone. With each passing night, the visits grew more frequent. The thuds became more pronounced, the stains darker. I started to dread the evening hours, each moment dragging on as I waited for the next encounter. Who, or what, was the source of this disturbance? I felt like a character in a story that had spiraled out of control, trapped in a narrative I couldn't escape. The anxiety twisted in my stomach, and I turned to old friends for comfort, hoping they might distract me from my growing paranoia. We shared laughs over coffee, but deep down, I felt the shadows looming, ready to pounce as soon as I returned home. One evening, as I prepared for bed, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a fleeting silhouette darting past the window. My heart raced as I rushed to the curtain, pulling it back with trembling hands. But there was nothing there. Just the dark, empty street, illuminated by the dim glow of the streetlights. I closed the curtain, trying to convince myself that it was nothing, just a trick of the night. But sleep eluded me. I lay awake, the sounds of the world outside fading into an eerie stillness. That was when I first felt it, a sense of being watched, a cold gaze piercing through the darkness. It felt real, tangible, as if someone was lurking just beyond the threshold of my reality. As the hours dragged on, I could no longer tell if the noises were real or simply echoes of my frayed nerves. All I knew was that I had to confront whatever it was that haunted my nights. But what if it was something beyond my understanding? Something that thrived on fear? The thought sent chills down my spine, and I closed my eyes tightly, willing myself to sleep. Yet, even in my dreams, the shadows followed, twisting and turning, lurking just out of sight. As the days passed, my resolve began to fray. I found myself oscillating between rational thought and unfounded fears. The shadows in my apartment had become more than just mere annoyances. They felt like harbingers of something sinister lurking just out of reach. I spent my waking hours preparing for the next encounter, mapping out escape routes and strategies in my mind, desperately seeking some semblance of control over my increasingly unstable reality. On the third night, I made a decision. Armed with a flashlight, I would confront the source of the disturbances. I couldn't let fear dictate my life any longer. I felt a surge of defiance as I sat up in bed, my heart pounding with anticipation. I waited in silence, every creak of the floorboards amplifying the tension in the air. Midnight struck, and the familiar thud echoed through the apartment once more, sharper this time, more pronounced. I gripped the flashlight tightly, its beam flickering slightly as I rose from the bed. With each cautious step, I approached the living room, my breath shallow and quickening. There it was again, a rustle, followed by the unmistakable sound of something sliding across the floor. I rounded the corner, and my heart dropped as I shone the light into the darkness. The beam illuminated the space, revealing the stain on the floor had grown, stretching towards the corner like a dark tendril reaching out for me. I gasped, recoiling instinctively as the scent of earth and decay wafted into my nostrils. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling but defiant. Silence enveloped me, thick and suffocating. I felt the weight of the darkness pressing in, threatening to swallow me whole. Just then, a whisper floated through the air, so soft it was almost imperceptible. My heart raced as I strained to hear, every nerve in my body on high alert. The whispering continued, rising and falling like a forgotten lullaby, wrapping around me like a cold embrace. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was haunting, filled with an otherworldly sorrow. The shadows began to coalesce, swirling in the corner of the room. I couldn't tear my gaze away as they formed a shape, a figure obscured by darkness, the edges blurred and indistinct. Panic gripped me, and I turned to run, but my feet felt rooted to the ground, as if the shadows had wrapped around my ankles, holding me captive. "Please, don't," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. The figure seemed to lean closer, the whispering intensifying as it reached for me, its presence cold and heavy. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me, mingling with something else, something almost like a plea. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure dissipated into the shadows, leaving me standing alone in the dim light of my living room, breathless and trembling. I staggered back, colliding with the wall, feeling the cool surface against my skin as I struggled to comprehend what had just happened. The next morning, I awoke to the sun filtering through the curtains, casting warm rays across the room. It felt surreal, almost like a cruel joke. Had it all been a dream? I rushed to the living room, half expecting to find evidence of the night's events, but the stain on the floor was gone, the room returned to its mundane state. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread, though, the echo of the whispers still lingering in my mind. I spent the day distracted, unable to focus on anything other than the figure that had invaded my dreams. Friends reached out, but I brushed them off, unwilling to share the terror that had taken root in my soul. That night, as I lay in bed, I prepared myself for the confrontation that would inevitably come. The clock ticked away the seconds, each one dragging like an eternity. I could feel the anticipation building within me, mingling with the familiar dread. Finally, as the hour approached, I felt a shiver run down my spine. I was not alone. The shadows deepened around me, stretching and twisting, and I knew the visitor was back. I steeled myself, flashlight in hand, and stepped out into the darkness of the living room once more. The shadows were denser, more foreboding, swirling with an energy that sent chills racing up my arms. I could feel the presence, like a weight on my chest, suffocating and relentless. "Show yourself," I yelled, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The air grew heavy, the atmosphere charged with an intensity that felt almost palpable. And then it began again, the whispers, soft and melodic, entwining with the air around me. But this time, I felt something different, a sense of familiarity, as if the voice was calling to me. "What do you want?" I shouted into the void, my heart racing in my chest. The shadows shifted, swirling around me, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I could make out a figure in the darkness, its features obscured but undeniably there. And then, with a rush of wind, it was gone, leaving me standing in the dim light, my heart pounding in my ears. I felt a surge of frustration and fear. What was this creature? Why was it haunting me? But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. The fear was suffocating, but I was running out of time. I had to face this unknown terror, whatever it was, before it consumed me whole. The next few nights became a blur of anxiety and unease. I could feel the shadows closing in around me, each encounter leaving me more afraid than the last. I had tried everything to rationalize my fears, meditation, loud music, even sleeping with the lights on, but nothing could quell the growing storm within me. It was as if I had invited a malevolent force into my life, and no matter how much I wanted to deny it, it was always there, lurking just out of sight. The shadows had become my constant companions, whispering secrets I couldn't quite grasp, enticing me with an allure I both feared and craved. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at work, I returned home to find a note taped to my door. My heart raced as I peeled it away, revealing a message scrawled in hasty, uneven letters. "You're not alone. It sees you." I felt the color drain from my face. Who had written this? How did they know? The words twisted in my gut, and I tore my gaze away from the note, fearing the shadows that danced behind me. I took a deep breath, attempting to steady my racing heart, and forced myself to unlock the door. The apartment felt colder than usual as I stepped inside, the silence amplifying the pounding of my heart. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone waiting for me in the dark, but the room was empty. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I settled into my routine, trying to distract myself from the growing sense of dread. I made a cup of tea, the steam swirling into the air like a fleeting comfort, and curled up on the couch with a book. But the words blurred before my eyes, the shadows in the corners of the room whispering secrets I couldn't understand. And then, just as I began to feel a semblance of calm, the whispers returned. Soft, melodic, yet laced with something sinister. I dropped the book, my heart racing, and shone my flashlight towards the corners of the room, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. "Show yourself," I demanded, my voice trembling but fierce. The shadows swirled, coiling around the furniture like tendrils of smoke, and for a moment I thought I could see a face emerge from the darkness, a hollow gaze, eyes like endless voids staring right through me. I stumbled back, my breath hitching in my throat. What do you want? I yelled, panic clawing at my insides. The shadows seemed to pulse with energy, and the whispers crescendoed, surrounding me in a chaotic symphony of sound. Help us, the voice echoed, distant yet piercing, a haunting melody that sent chills down my spine. I strained to comprehend the words, but they felt like fragments of a nightmare, slipping through my fingers just as I thought I could grasp them. Who are you? I shouted, my voice breaking as I fought against the rising tide of fear. What do you need from me? The shadows surged forward, enveloping me in a cold embrace. I felt a rush of emotions, fear, sorrow, desperation, as if I were drowning in a sea of lost souls. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices echoing in my mind, intertwining with my thoughts. Help us, before it's too late. And then, as quickly as it had started, the chaos ceased, leaving me gasping in the silence. The shadows retreated, leaving me standing alone in the center of the room, heart pounding and mind racing. What had just happened? I stumbled back towards the couch, feeling the weight of the darkness pressing in around me. The message on the door echoed in my mind, "It sees you." I knew I had to do something. I couldn't allow myself to be consumed by this darkness, whatever it was. I needed to find answers. Maybe there was someone who could help me understand what was happening. The next day, I reached out to a friend who had dabbled in the paranormal. Sarah had always been fascinated by the supernatural, and I figured she might have some insight into my plight. I sent her a message detailing everything that had happened, from the whispers to the shadowy figure that haunted me. I felt a mix of relief and anxiety as I hit send, unsure of what her response would be. Later that evening, Sarah called me, her voice a blend of excitement and concern. "I want to come over," she said, and I could hear the determination in her tone. "We need to investigate this together." "Are you sure?" I hesitated, my heart racing at the thought of someone else witnessing the madness that had invaded my life. But part of me longed for her presence, for someone who could share in my terror. "Absolutely. We'll figure this out. I'll bring some supplies," she assured me. As night fell, I busied myself preparing for her arrival, my mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe together we could confront the darkness that had taken hold of my life. But as the clock ticked closer to her arrival, a sense of dread crept back in. When the doorbell rang, I nearly jumped out of my skin. I opened the door to find Sarah standing there, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. She stepped inside, her presence bringing a momentary sense of comfort. "Tell me everything," she urged, her eyes searching mine for answers. I shared my experiences, the whispers, the figure, the growing darkness that had seeped into my life. Her brow furrowed as she listened, and I could tell she was taking it all seriously. "We need to set up a protective barrier," she said, her voice steady. "I brought some sage and crystals. We can cleanse this space." I felt a mix of skepticism and hope. Would this really work? But I was willing to try anything to rid myself of the looming shadows. We gathered in the living room, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. As Sarah began to light the sage, the fragrant smoke curled into the air, mingling with the stillness of the room. I watched as she moved around, whispering words I couldn't understand, her voice low and soothing. But just as the tension began to ease, the shadows stirred once more. The temperature dropped, and the whispers returned, filling the air with a haunting melody that made my skin crawl. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, my heart racing. Sarah paused, her eyes wide. "Yes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in, the whispers rising to a fever pitch. "It's here!" I screamed, panic surging within me as I looked around for an escape. But as I turned to Sarah, I saw her expression shift from concern to something else, something darker. "Help us," she whispered, her voice no longer her own. My blood ran cold as I realized the shadows were not just haunting me, they were taking her, too. "Sarah!" I yelled, fear coursing through my veins. I stepped back, my pulse racing as I tried to comprehend what was happening. The words that had once felt like desperate pleas now resonated with an unsettling finality. I grasped the flashlight tighter, its beam flickering uncertainly, reflecting my rising panic. The shadows swirled around us, thick and suffocating, and I felt as if the very air had become alive with malevolence. Sarah's features twisted in the flickering light, her eyes clouded, as if the darkness was pulling her under its spell. "Help us," she repeated, her voice hauntingly distant. "No! Sarah, fight it!" I shouted, my heart pounding. I didn't know what was happening to her, but I couldn't lose her to whatever darkness had invaded my life. I could see the struggle within her, a flicker of recognition behind her eyes that sent a pang of hope through me. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged forward, reaching for her hand. "You're still in there. You have to resist," I cried out, desperation threading my voice. The shadows flickered, shifting as if they were alive, swirling closer, encroaching upon us both. Suddenly, Sarah blinked, and for a moment, the light returned to her eyes. "The crystals," she gasped, her voice breaking through the haze. "We need to use them, now." I fumbled through the supplies she had brought, my hands shaking. I found the small pouch of crystals and held them tightly, feeling their cool weight against my palm. "What do we do?" I shouted over the rising cacophony of whispers that filled the room. "Form a circle. Focus on the light. We have to push it back," she directed, her voice stronger now, even as the shadows pressed in, hungry and relentless. Together, we knelt on the floor, forming a small circle with the crystals placed between us. I could feel the oppressive darkness swirling around us, clawing at my mind, feeding on our fear. "Close your eyes," Sarah urged. "Focus on the light. Picture it surrounding us." I did as she said, squeezing my eyes shut, forcing myself to imagine a bright, warm light enveloping us, pushing back against the darkness. As we concentrated, I felt a pulse, a rhythm echoing from the crystals. It resonated through me, building a barrier against the encroaching shadows. I could hear the whispers fading, almost like a distant echo. But the shadows weren't done yet. They lashed out, striking at the barrier we had created. I could feel the pressure against my mind, the chaos trying to break through. "Keep going. Don't give in," Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the haze. I focused harder, pouring every ounce of my fear and anger into that bright light, willing it to grow stronger. Slowly, I began to feel the shadows receding, their grasp loosening as our combined will pushed them back. The whispers transformed into frantic cries, the desperate pleas of those trapped within the darkness. "Help us! Help us!" With each chant, I felt my heart race faster, the energy pulsing through the crystals becoming a lifeline, a connection to something greater than ourselves. And just as I thought we might succeed, a blinding flash erupted from the crystals, enveloping the room in brilliant light. I gasped, shielding my eyes as the shadows shrieked, twisting and contorting in a frenzy. I could feel them breaking apart, disintegrating into nothingness, the weight of their presence lifting. Now! Sarah shouted, her voice piercing through the chaos. Now, we push. With one last surge of strength, we focused our energy outward, forcing the darkness to retreat completely. The air crackled with power, and with a final, deafening roar, the shadows dissipated, leaving nothing but an eerie stillness in their wake. I opened my eyes slowly, my heart still pounding as I took in the scene around me. The apartment was bathed in soft, golden light, the oppressive shadows vanished. But as I looked over at Sarah, my heart sank. She was slumped on the floor, her eyes closed, a look of exhaustion etched across her features. Sarah. I rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. Are you okay? I shook her gently, fear clawing at my chest. After what felt like an eternity, her eyes fluttered open, the haze lifting as she blinked against the light. What happened? She murmured, confusion clouding her gaze. You were. I don't know how to explain it, I stammered, relief flooding through me. But we pushed it back. I think we did it. As she sat up, the remnants of fear lingered in the air, and I could still sense the shadows lurking just beyond the edges of my perception. But it's not gone, is it? Sarah said softly, her brow furrowing as she glanced around the room. No, I admitted, my heart heavy with the realization. It's still out there, waiting. I can feel it. We need to figure out what it wants, she replied, her voice steadying. If it's connected to you, maybe there's something in your past, something we haven't uncovered yet. I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. I've always felt different, I confessed. As a child, I would see things, shadows moving in the corner of my eye, whispers in the dark. But I thought I had imagined it all. Maybe it's time to confront those memories, Sarah suggested, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. We need to dig deeper. If we can understand what this entity is after, we might find a way to banish it for good. As night fell again, the shadows outside my window felt like a reminder of the battle we had just fought. But now, with Sarah by my side, I felt a flicker of hope igniting within me. We would uncover the truth together, whatever it took. With Sarah's resolve fueling my own, we spent the next few days digging through my memories, piecing together the fragments of my past. I had always considered my childhood to be ordinary, filled with mundane worries and common fears. But now, the more I recalled, the more I recognized a tapestry woven with shadows. We started with old family photos, relics from a time that felt both distant and intimate. I rummaged through boxes in the attic, pulling out dusty albums and yellow papers. Each photo was a window into a world that felt both familiar and foreign. Look at this one, I said, holding up a faded picture of my 6-year-old self, grinning in front of a large oak tree. My father stood beside me, his arm around my shoulder, a proud smile on his face. Sarah examined it closely. Do you remember this day? Not really. I think we had a picnic, I replied, studying the background. The tree loomed large, its branches stretching ominously over us. But I've always felt drawn to that tree. It was in our backyard. There was something strange about it. What do you mean? I paused, searching for the right words. I remember playing near it, but there were times I felt like something was watching me from its branches. I would see shadows darting among the leaves, but when I looked closer, there was nothing there. Maybe it's connected, Sarah suggested, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Let's go back to your old house. The idea sent a shiver of dread down my spine, but I knew it was necessary. That tree held a significance I could no longer ignore. The following weekend, we drove to my childhood neighborhood, the streets lined with familiar houses. As we approached my old home, a wave of nostalgia crashed over me, intertwined with an undercurrent of fear. The house stood unchanged, its exterior just as I remembered. But the tree, now towering and gnarled, looked even more foreboding. I stepped out of the car, my heart racing as I approached the yard. The tree loomed above me, its branches twisting and curling like dark fingers. I could feel the shadows crawling around its base, whispering secrets just out of reach. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking through my reverie. "I'm not sure," I admitted, feeling a chill wash over me. "I can't shake this feeling that I'm being watched." "Let's investigate," she said, her tone encouraging. We moved closer to the tree, the air thick with tension. I glanced around, half expecting something to emerge from the shadows, but it was just us. As we circled the trunk, I noticed something etched into the bark, my name. "Look!" I pointed, my heart racing. "That's my name." Sarah leaned in closer. "It's like someone carved it there." "Why would anyone do that?" I wondered aloud, a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. It's almost as if I was meant to find it. "Do you remember anyone in particular who would have done this?" I racked my brain, searching for any memories that might fit. Not really. Just some neighborhood kids. We would play here all the time. "Maybe we should talk to some of them," Sarah suggested. "See if they remember anything unusual." I hesitated. It had been years since I'd seen any of them. But the thought of unraveling this mystery ignited a spark of determination within me. "Okay, let's do it." Over the next few days, we tracked down a few of my old friends. Some had moved away, while others had scattered across the city. But one name stood out, Mia. She had always been the most adventurous among us, and I remembered her fondly. After a few phone calls, I managed to get in touch with her. She agreed to meet us at a cafe nearby, and I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. As we sat across from Mia, the memories flooded back, the laughter, the games, the endless summer days spent exploring our neighborhood. "It's been ages," I exclaimed, grinning despite the weight on my shoulders. "Too long," she replied, her eyes sparkling. "What's new with you?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain my recent experiences. "Actually, I've been having some strange occurrences lately. I thought maybe you could help me remember something." Mia's expression shifted from playful to serious. "What kind of strange occurrences?" I took a deep breath, recounting my encounters with the shadows and the whispers that had haunted me. Mia listened intently, her brow furrowing as I spoke. "Do you remember anything unusual from our childhood? Any stories or events that might connect to this?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. She paused, her eyes narrowing in thought. "There was one time, but I thought it was just a game we played." "What do you mean?" Mia leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We used to pretend there was a ghost in the tree. We'd tell stories about it coming alive at night, watching us while we played. I thought it was just us being silly, but what?" I pressed, my heart racing. I remember feeling like something was really there. Sometimes, I would wake up in the middle of the night and see a shadow moving in the yard. I thought I was dreaming, but now, I'm not so sure. My stomach dropped. "You saw it too?" "Yeah, I thought I was the only one. But maybe it was real." Maybe we weren't just imagining it. Sarah glanced at me, her expression grave. We need to investigate further. If this entity is tied to your childhood, we have to uncover the truth. I nodded, a sense of determination washing over me. What do you think we should do? Mia leaned back, her eyes sparkling with a mix of fear and excitement. I can help you dig deeper. We can go back to the tree at night. Maybe we can confront whatever it is that's been haunting you. The thought sent chills down my spine, but I knew we had to face it. The darkness wouldn't simply vanish, it would continue to lurk, feeding our fears until we confronted it head-on. As night fell, a thick blanket of darkness settled over the town. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over everything, as if it were illuminating a stage for the sinister events about to unfold. With Mia and Sarah by my side, we stood at the foot of the gnarled tree, our breaths visible in the cool air, the tension palpable. I can't believe we're actually doing this, I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. The tree loomed above us, its branches swaying gently in the breeze, but it felt more like a warning than a welcome. We have to confront it, Mia replied, her voice steady. Whatever it is, it's connected to your past, and we need to face it together. Sarah nodded, her expression resolute. We'll use the crystals again. They helped before, maybe they can protect us now. As I pulled the small pouch from my pocket, I felt its reassuring weight, but anxiety gnawed at me. What if this doesn't work? What if we can't push it back this time? We won't let that happen, Sarah reassured me. Remember what we accomplished before. We've already proven we can resist it. Together, we formed a circle around the base of the tree, the crystals gleaming faintly in the moonlight. I felt the familiar pulse of energy as we focused our intentions, but the darkness loomed around us, an unseen predator waiting to strike. Let's begin, Mia said, her voice calm but filled with determination. We closed our eyes and joined hands, concentrating on the light within the crystals, allowing our minds to connect, weaving a thread of shared strength. The air around us grew still, an unnatural silence enveloping the area. I felt the shadows shift, creeping closer, as if drawn to our gathering. The whispers returned, chilling and urgent, swirling around us like an unseen wind. Help us, help us. I gritted my teeth, pushing back against the dread pooling in my stomach. Stay focused, I whispered, though I felt my resolve beginning to waver. Suddenly, a rustling sound erupted from above, breaking the silence like a gunshot. I opened my eyes, glancing up at the tree, my heart racing. The branches swayed violently, and I caught a glimpse of movement, dark shapes darting through the leaves, their outlines indistinct and elusive. Did you see that? Mia gasped, her grip tightening around my hand. Yeah, I breathed, fear crawling up my spine. It's here. In an instant, the temperature dropped, and I felt an overwhelming presence pressing down upon us. It was as if the darkness was a living entity wrapping around us, suffocating and hungry. I could sense its intent, its desire to break through our defenses and consume us. Focus, Sarah urged, her voice steady despite the rising terror. Picture the light. Push it back. We closed our eyes again, trying to ignore the fear creeping in. The whispers intensified, now sounding like a cacophony of voices, each one pleading, each one desperate. Help us, help us. I concentrated harder, imagining the warm glow of light radiating from the crystals, expanding outward like a protective shield. But the shadows pressed against it, hungry and relentless. I felt the energy of the crystals pulsing, but it was as if the darkness was too powerful, too insatiable. Hold on, Mia cried, her voice breaking through the panic. We need to believe in the light. We can't give in. With her words echoing in my mind, I summoned every ounce of strength within me. You will not take us, I shouted, feeling the power surge within the circle. The light intensified, bright and blinding, pushing against the shadows. For a moment, the darkness recoiled, the whispers fading to a distant murmur. I could feel the weight of the shadows lifting, but I knew it wasn't over. They would come back, angrier and more desperate. Then, a chilling laugh sliced through the night, reverberating in my bones. It was low and menacing, echoing around us as if the darkness itself were taunting us. You think you can resist? The voice slithered through the air, wrapping around my mind like a vice. Who are you? I shouted, my voice trembling. What do you want? Silence hung in the air, and for a moment, I thought we had won. But then, the shadows surged again, more aggressive, pressing against the light. I could feel Sarah and Mia's fear intertwining with mine, a knot of desperation threatening to break our concentration. Focus. Keep pushing, Sarah urged, her voice strained. We pressed our hands against the ground, pouring our energy into the crystals, but I felt the shadows clawing at my mind, creeping closer. Help us, the voices pleaded, now almost melodic, echoing a twisted lullaby. Suddenly, a bright flash erupted from the crystals, sending a shockwave of energy outward. I stumbled back, blinking against the brightness, and when I opened my eyes, I saw them, figures emerging from the shadows. They were distorted, faces twisted in agony, but their eyes bore a desperate plea. Help us, they whispered again, their voices intertwining with the darkness. No! Stay away! I cried out, recoiling in fear. But the figures moved closer, and I could see their pain, their suffering, and suddenly, I understood. They weren't here to harm us, they were trapped, caught in the web of shadows, seeking a way to escape. Please, help us, one figure cried, reaching out with a ghostly hand. Can we help them? Mia asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. I don't know, I admitted, my heart racing. What if they're a trick? What if this is all a ruse to bring us in? Or maybe it's a chance to finally break the cycle, Sarah interjected. If we can free them, perhaps we can free ourselves. The shadows writhed and twisted, pulling at the figures, trying to drag them back into the abyss. I could feel the despair wrapping around me, an icy grip tightening on my chest. Listen to us, I shouted, my voice breaking through the chaos. If we can help you, we will. But you have to show us how. The figures paused, their expressions shifting from despair to hope, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a glimmer of connection. We can't escape alone, one of them whispered. Together, we rallied our strength, channeling our energy into the crystals once more. The light swelled, illuminating the darkness and the figures trapped within. Let us go, they cried, their voices merging with ours as we pushed against the shadows. The darkness screamed, lashing out as we focused all our intentions on freeing the trapped souls. But the shadows fought back with ferocity, clawing our minds, and I felt the despair threatening to engulf us once again. Don't give in. We can do this, Sarah shouted, her voice a lifeline in the dark. As we concentrated, I sensed a shift in the air. The shadows began to recede, the figures reaching toward the light, their forms shimmering with hope. Together, I shouted, pouring everything I had into the crystals, urging the trapped souls to break free. In that moment, We became a conduit for their energy, a bridge between the light and the darkness. The connection sparked like electricity, the air crackling with raw power as the shadows thrashed in desperation. With one final push, the light exploded outward, enveloping the figures, and for a brief second, I could see their faces, expressions of pure relief washing over them as they were pulled into the light. But just as quickly, the darkness lashed out, the shrieks echoing in the air as it fought to reclaim its lost prey. I felt it clawing at my mind, desperate to drown us in despair. "Run!" Mia shouted, her voice barely breaking through the chaos. "We have to go." As the light expanded, I felt the pull of the shadows intensifying, but we turned and ran, the night air thick with the remnants of our battle. The cries of the figures faded behind us, but I could still feel their presence lingering, a bittersweet reminder of what we had encountered. We stumbled back to the car, adrenaline surging through us as we piled in, breathless and shaken. "What just happened?" I gasped, my heart racing. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her eyes wide with shock. "But I think we might have freed them. But the darkness is still out there." Mia turned to me, her expression serious. "We need to find a way to permanently banish it. It's only going to get stronger." As I sat in the passenger seat, my heart still pounding, I knew this battle was far from over. The darkness wouldn't let us go so easily. But we had taken the first step, and with that spark of hope igniting within me, I realized that we would face whatever came next together. The following days passed in a blur. The air felt thick with tension, and sleep eluded me. I could feel the darkness lurking just beyond the periphery of my thoughts, waiting for a moment of weakness to pounce. Sarah and Mia remained at my side, their unwavering support grounding me, but I knew we couldn't outrun the shadows forever. As we gathered at my apartment one evening, I set a large candle in the center of the living room. The flickering flame cast dancing shadows on the walls, an unsettling reminder of our recent confrontation. "We have to figure out how to finish this," I said, my voice heavy with dread. "It's only a matter of time before it comes for me again." "What about the legends?" Mia suggested, her brow furrowing in concentration. "You mentioned the local folklore about the tree and the shadows. Maybe there's something in those stories that can help us." I nodded, remembering the tales passed down through generations. The townspeople believed that the tree was a portal, a gateway to another realm. They thought it housed lost souls, unable to find peace. "Then we need to seal that portal," Sarah asserted. "We need to confront whatever is on the other side and put an end to it once and for all." With newfound determination, we began researching old books and local archives, piecing together fragments of stories that had long been forgotten. The more we learned, the clearer the picture became. The entity was a malevolent force, feeding off fear and despair, seeking to drag the living into its dark embrace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we gathered our supplies: candles, salt, crystals, and sage. We drove to the tree one last time, the air crackling with tension, the weight of our purpose pressing down on us. "This is it," I whispered, stepping out of the car. The tree loomed before us, its gnarled branches twisting like dark fingers against the night sky. I could feel the shadows swirling, a palpable sense of dread creeping in as we approached. We set up a circle around the tree, placing the candles at intervals, the flickering flames illuminating the darkness. I could sense the shadows watching, waiting for our move. "We need to perform the sealing ritual," I said, my voice steady despite the unease simmering within me. As we began to chant, the wind howled through the branches, carrying with it the whispers that haunted me. help us," they pleaded, echoing through the night. But I held firm, forcing myself to concentrate on the light radiating from the crystals. Suddenly, the shadows surged, coiling around us like smoke, clawing at my mind. I could feel their desperation, their hunger. "You think you can banish me?" A voice snarled from the darkness, its tone dripping with malice. "Leave us alone," I shouted, feeling the fear threaten to overwhelm me. "Your light is weak," the voice taunted, and the shadows lashed out, striking the candles, snuffing them out one by one. The darkness closed in, thick and suffocating, drowning out the light. "Keep going," Sarah urged, her voice a beacon in the gloom. "We can't let it win." The remaining candles flickered in the oppressive darkness, but we pressed on, our voices rising in intensity as we recited the ancient incantation. I could feel the energy building, a surge of light pushing back against the encroaching shadows. "Help us! Help us!" the voices cried, growing louder, more frantic, but I refused to give in. I could see their faces in my mind, desperate and pained, and I knew we had to set them free. In that moment of clarity, I reached deep within myself, drawing on the strength of my friends, channeling our combined energy into the chant. "We seal this portal, we banish your darkness." The shadows recoiled, writhing in anguish as the light intensified, bursting forth from the crystals in a brilliant flash. The darkness screamed, a sound that chilled my bones, and I felt the weight of despair lifting, the shadows dissipating like smoke in the wind. "Don't stop!" Mia cried, her voice fierce and determined. We poured every ounce of strength into the ritual, the light radiating outwards, engulfing the tree and the shadows that clung to it. The voices of the trapped souls melded with our own, a symphony of hope and despair intertwined. "Help us! Help us!" But as the light surged, the entity unleashed its fury. A chilling wind swept through the clearing, and the shadows morphed into twisted forms, clawing at the edges of our light. I felt the air grow thick, the pressure building as the darkness lashed out, trying to break our resolve. "Stay strong," Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. I focused on the flickering flame at the center of our circle, its light unwavering against the onslaught. "We can do this together," I shouted, pouring my heart into the chant, my voice rising above the cacophony. Suddenly, a blinding flash erupted from the crystals, and I felt the ground shake beneath us. The shadows screamed, their cries echoing through the night, a chilling symphony of rage and despair. "No! You will not take us!" As the light burst forth, I felt the shadows disintegrating, their forms dissipating into the ether. "Help us! Help us!" they cried, but their voices faded into silence, replaced by a profound stillness that enveloped us. And then, just like that, it was over. The light gradually dimmed, leaving only the faint glow of the candles flickering in the still night. The shadows were gone, banished to wherever they had come from, and the oppressive weight that had settled over us for so long lifted like a heavy fog. "We did it," I gasped, disbelief washing over me as I sank to my knees, tears of relief streaming down my face. Mia and Sarah joined me, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and elation. "We really did it," Mia breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. But as I looked up at the tree, a haunting thought lingered in my mind. The darkness may have been banished for now, but it had been powerful, and it could return. I knew the battle was over, but the war against fear and despair would continue. "I can still feel it," I admitted, my voice trembling. "What if it comes back?" "It won't," Sarah said firmly, her eyes shining with determination. "We're stronger now." We faced it together. As we stood beneath the moonlight, I felt a glimmer of hope sparking within me. We had confronted the darkness and emerged victorious, but I also knew the importance of vigilance. The shadows would always be lurking, waiting for a moment of weakness, but together we could face whatever came our way. And with that resolve, I stood tall, ready to face the future, whatever it might hold. Old watchmaker. Have you ever felt time slip away without you? In the small, unremarkable town of Eldridge, life unfolded like a worn tapestry, the threads weaving together the mundane and the extraordinary. I often found myself entranced by the rhythmic ticking of clocks that filled my life. But none intrigued me more than the timepieces created by the old clockmaker, Mr. Enoch, whose shop sat at the end of a narrow cobblestone street. His creations were not just clocks, they were living stories, each one with its own heartbeat. As a child, I would watch him work through the dusty window, the warm glow of light illuminating his gentle hands as they meticulously crafted gears and springs. Mr. Enoch was a quiet man, with silver hair that danced in the air like the ticking of a pendulum. He spoke little, but his eyes were filled with a wisdom that seemed to echo through the ages. I often imagined he held secrets of time itself. One gray morning, an unsettling feeling washed over me as I approached his shop. The familiar sound of his clocks chiming in harmonious unison was absent, replaced by an eerie silence that enveloped the air. It was then that I noticed a closed sign hanging crookedly on the door, swaying slightly in the cool breeze. My heart raced. Something felt wrong, and I couldn't shake the sensation that a shadow loomed over the town, whispering of dangers yet to come. As I turned to leave, a deep, resonating sound broke the stillness, echoing through the empty street. It was a single chime, heavy and foreboding, reverberating in my bones. I paused, confusion washing over me. The clockmaker was gone. How could a clock still ring? My gut twisted with unease, and I felt an inexplicable pull to return to the shop. What if Mr. Enoch needed help? I pushed open the door, the familiar creak now sounding like a warning. Inside, dust motes floated in the sunlight, illuminating the rows of clocks that stood silent, as if in mourning. My eyes fell upon an ancient grandfather clock in the corner, its pendulum swinging slowly. As I approached, I noticed something strange. The hands of the clock were moving, but they did not mark the hours. Instead, they counted down, each tick resonating like a heartbeat against the stillness. I glanced around, feeling an unseen presence lurking in the shadows, watching me. My breath quickened, and a chill crawled up my spine. I was drawn to the grandfather clock, its brass face glinting ominously. Suddenly, it struck midnight. The sound echoed loudly, vibrating through the very core of the town. That night, the sky turned a deep indigo, and the air was thick with anticipation. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the haunting echoes of the clock in my mind. Each tick felt like a countdown, a reminder that time was slipping away not just for me, but for everyone in Eldridge. As the hours passed, I could feel a growing sense of dread creeping in. I couldn't shake the feeling that something dreadful was unfolding. I imagined Mr. Enoch's hands guiding the clock's mechanisms, even in his absence. What if his timepieces held more than just the ability to tell time? What if they had a deeper connection to the lives of the townsfolk, a bond that went beyond mere craftsmanship? Little did I know that the old clockmaker's secret would soon unravel, casting a shadow over Eldridge, binding the fate of every soul within its confines. Would I be brave enough to confront the clockmaker's legacy, or would I succumb to the whispers of time? Only time would tell. The next morning, a heavy fog blanketed Eldridge, shrouding the town in an unsettling silence. I stepped outside, the chill nipping at my skin. As I walked through the eerily quiet streets, a sense of unease gripped my heart. The absence of Mr. Enoch felt palpable, like an open wound in the fabric of our community. The townsfolk seemed to share my apprehension, their faces drawn and eyes wide. Conversations were hushed, and laughter had vanished. I heard whispers about the clockmaker's death, though no one dared speak of how it had happened. It was as if his passing had set off a chain of events that no one could fully understand. Every tick of my own watch felt louder, an ominous reminder of the grandfather clock's strange countdown. With each passing hour, I could feel the weight of dread bearing down on me. It was then that I made a decision. I needed to investigate the old clockmaker's workshop further. Perhaps there was something left behind, some clue that could explain the sinister turn of events. As I stepped back into the shop, the familiar creak of the door echoed through the empty space, sending a shiver down my spine. I glanced around, searching for any sign of life, but the stillness was suffocating. The dust-covered surfaces and silent clocks felt like tombstones in a graveyard of memories. I approached the grandfather clock again, its pendulum still swinging with an unsettling rhythm. The hands had moved slightly since my last visit, now ticking down even closer to the unknown. I hesitated for a moment, then reached out to touch the clock's surface. The wood felt warm beneath my fingers, almost alive. Suddenly, I heard a faint sound, a soft whisper, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. My heart raced as I strained to listen. It was coming from the back of the shop. Gathering my courage, I followed the sound, my footsteps echoing against the wooden floorboards. The door to the workshop creaked open, revealing a dimly lit space filled with the remnants of Mr. Enoch's craft. A chilling sensation washed over me as I stepped inside. The walls were lined with clocks of all shapes and sizes, their hands all frozen in time, except for one small pocket watch resting on a cluttered workbench. It ticked rhythmically, almost as if it were trying to communicate with me. I felt an inexplicable pull toward it, as if it held the answers I sought. As I picked up the watch, its surface gleamed in the dim light, reflecting something dark in the corner of my eye. I turned quickly, expecting to see someone behind me, but the room remained empty. The sense of being watched intensified, the air thick with unspoken words and unshed tears. I opened the pocket watch, revealing a delicate inscription on the inner lid. It read, "Time reveals all truths." A shiver ran down my spine. I couldn't help but wonder what truths lay hidden beneath the surface of this quaint town. What had Mr. Enoch known that he hadn't shared? Suddenly, the grandfather clock chimed again, the sound echoing through the shop. The tick-tock became frantic, as if the clocks were warning me of something. I looked at the pocket watch and gasped. It was counting down, mirroring the ominous hands of the grandfather clock. A sense of urgency washed over me. Time was running out, but for whom? As I rushed out of the workshop, I felt a gust of wind sweep past me, carrying with it a faint, sorrowful melody. It resonated deep within me, awakening something I couldn't quite grasp. I turned to follow the sound, leading me back into the heart of Eldridge, where the townsfolk gathered, their faces pale with fear. A figure stood at the center, draped in shadow, a woman I recognized from the corner store. Her voice rang out, quivering yet strong, as she spoke of Mr. Enoch's clocks and the lives they intertwined with. She claimed that every tick marked not just the passing of time, but also the lifeblood of the townsfolk. As she spoke, I felt a growing realization that the clocks weren't merely machines, they were connected to our very existence, a web of fate spun by the clockmaker's hand. Each person in the crowd exchanged anxious glances, their hearts racing with the weight of the words. I could see their fears mirrored in my own. The countdown was real, and it felt as though we were all caught in a snare of time that Mr. Enoch had created. But as the final chime of the grandfather clock echoed through the town, an unsettling truth began to dawn on me. What if the clockmaker's legacy was not a gift but a curse? What if we were not simply living our lives, but rather living borrowed time? With the heavy realization hanging in the air, I knew I had to confront this mystery. I had to understand the power of those clocks before it was too late. The clock was ticking, and we were all running out of time. The fog began to lift as I made my way through the streets, but the weight of what I had learned hung heavily on my shoulders. Each face I passed seemed a mirror of my own fear, reflecting the anxiety that had taken root in our small town. It was as if an invisible thread connected us all, binding our fates to the old clockmaker's mysterious legacy. I gathered a small group of brave souls, those who had once admired Mr. Enoch and his creations. Together, we decided to meet that evening at the town square. With every tick of the clock, our apprehension grew. The shadows lengthened as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the cobblestones. As night fell, we huddled together, our breaths visible in the cool air. The woman from the corner store, Miriam, stood at the front. Her voice quivered, yet there was a determination in her gaze. "We must confront the truth of these clocks," she urged. "We can't let fear bind us. If we are to survive, we must understand what is happening." Each of us nodded in agreement, though uncertainty lingered in our hearts. We knew that the secrets of the clocks held the key to our survival, but the weight of the unknown pressed down on us like a thick fog. We decided to return to Mr. Enoch's shop, determined to uncover the truth behind his craft. As we approached the shop, the air thickened with tension. I felt the familiar pull toward the grandfather clock, its ticking now louder, almost deafening. I could sense a presence within its walls, a lingering essence of the clockmaker himself. Inside, we gathered around the grandfather clock. Its pendulum swung steadily, casting long shadows across the room. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the clock's polished surface. What if we're not supposed to tamper with it? I murmured, unease creeping in. Or what if we are? Miriam countered, her voice steady. What if we can unlock its secrets? With a deep breath, I nodded. I reached for the clock's ornate face, tracing my fingers along the engravings. To my surprise, I found a small latch hidden within the carvings. With a gentle tug, the clock's front panel swung open, revealing a complex array of gears and springs. As we leaned in closer, a sudden gust of wind burst through the shop, slamming the door shut behind us. Panic erupted as we turned to find ourselves enclosed, our only source of light flickering ominously. Shadows danced on the walls, and the ticking grew louder, pulsating like a heartbeat. "What's happening?" one of my companions exclaimed, fear edging into his voice. "It's the clock." I shouted over the din, "It's responding to us." Suddenly, the clock struck midnight, and the air crackled with energy. The gears began to whir, spinning faster and faster until they became a blur. The shadows on the walls morphed into figures, twisting and writhing like smoke, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me. "No!" I screamed, clutching my head as memories flooded in, fragments of the townsfolk's lives intertwined with the clocks. I saw moments of joy, sorrow, and regret, all tangled within the very essence of Eldritch. The figures coalesced into faces I recognized, friends, family, and even Mr. Enoch himself. I gasped as realization struck me. The clocks were not just counting down time, they were counting the moments of our lives. Suddenly, a chilling voice filled the room, resonating from the depths of the grandfather clock. "You have awakened me," it said, echoing with a haunting familiarity. "Time is a fragile thread, and you have meddled with its design. We huddled together, our fear palpable. "Who are you?" I shouted, my voice trembling. "I am the keeper of time," the voice replied. Mr. Enoch forged the connection between this town and the clocks, intertwining your lives with the ticking of gears. Each chime signifies a life, and now that he is gone, the burden falls upon you. A heavy silence followed. The weight of the truth settled upon us. "But we didn't ask for this," Miriam cried out. "We shouldn't be tied to his legacy." "Yet you are," the voice echoed, almost pitying. "If you wish to break this cycle, you must confront the essence of your own fears. Only then will you unlock the true power of the clocks." With that, the room plunged into darkness, and the figures vanished. My heart raced as I realized the depths of the challenge that lay before us. We had awakened something ancient, and we needed to confront our fears to free ourselves from this curse. "Are we ready to face this?" I asked, looking around at my friends, who were expressions of determination mingled with trepidation. "I'd rather fight for my life than let it be dictated by a clock," Miriam said, her voice unwavering. And so, we made a pact. Together, we would unravel the mysteries of the clocks and face whatever lay ahead. But as I gazed at the grandfather clock, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was no longer our ally. It was a relentless adversary, and the countdown had begun. The ticking shadows loomed ever closer, and we were running out of time. The air was thick with anticipation as we stood in the dimly lit workshop, our collective resolve crystallizing into something tangible. The grandfather clock loomed before us, its pendulum swaying like a metronome marking the final moments of our lives. Each tick seemed to resonate with a deep sense of urgency, echoing the heartbeat of our fears. "Let's begin," I said, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my hands. We needed to confront our fears individually, but together, to break the cycle that bound us to this curse. Miriam stepped forward first, her breath steadying as she faced the clock. "I fear losing my family," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every tick reminds me of how quickly time slips away, how fleeting our moments together can be." As she spoke, the clock began to chime softly, each note vibrating with the weight of her fear. I watched as shadows danced around her, weaving in and out like specters. But instead of retreating, she stood firm, refusing to be consumed by the darkness. "I choose to cherish every moment," she declared, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I will not let fear steal my joy." The shadows recoiled, as if repelled by her strength. The clock's ticking slowed, and I felt a surge of hope. Perhaps facing our fears could weaken the grip of the curse. Next, it was my turn. I stepped toward the clock, heart pounding as I prepared to voice my own fears. "I fear the unknown," I admitted, my voice echoing against the walls. "I'm terrified of what lies ahead, of not knowing whether I'll have a future." As the words left my lips, the shadows swirled around me, encroaching with a chilling embrace. Memories of doubt and uncertainty flooded my mind, whispering of all the missed opportunities and roads not taken. But I took a deep breath, drawing upon Miriam's strength. "I choose to embrace the unknown," I said firmly. "I will trust in my ability to navigate whatever comes next." The shadows flickered, and with each word, I felt their hold weaken. The clock chimed in response, its sound resonating with newfound clarity. One by one, the others stepped forward, sharing their fears, fear of failure, fear of isolation, fear of never being understood. Each time someone faced their demons, the atmosphere shifted, the shadows ebbing away like a receding tide. With every confession, the grandfather clock's ticking grew softer, more melodic, as if acknowledging our resilience. But then, as the last person spoke, A sinister laugh erupted from the depths of the shop, echoing against the walls. "You think you can escape?" the voice taunted, chilling my blood. "Time is not so easily defeated." The grandfather clock began to shake violently, the pendulum swinging wildly as the room trembled. A wave of darkness surged forth, swallowing us whole. We clung to each other, our voices raised in defiance. "We will not be bound by fear," we shouted in unison, channeling our collective strength. The darkness writhed, but our voices pierced through, illuminating the shadows. In that moment, I saw the shadows transform, their forms shifting from terrifying specters into familiar faces, friends, family, even Mr. Enoch. They were reflections of our fears, manifestations of the burdens we carried. "Embrace us," the voice whispered, now softer, almost pleading. "We are a part of you. To truly be free, you must accept us." I hesitated, unsure if I could confront the pain of my fears directly. But then I remembered the moments of joy intertwined with those fears, the laughter, the love, the connections that made life beautiful despite the darkness. "I accept you," I shouted, feeling the warmth of my friends beside me. "You are part of my journey, but you do not define me." With that declaration, the shadows began to dissolve, swirling around us like autumn leaves caught in a gentle breeze. The grandfather clock chimed once more, this time with a sound that felt triumphant. The air lightened, the weight of fear lifting from our shoulders. But then, I noticed something unexpected. The pocket watch in my hand began to glow, pulsating with a rhythm that mirrored the beating of our hearts. As I looked closer, I realized it was counting down to 0. "Wait!" I cried out, panic rising in my chest. "What happens when it reaches 0? "The cycle will end," the voice replied, now calm and serene. "But not without consequence. You will face the final choice." "What choice?" Miriam asked, her eyes wide with fear. "To let go of the past," the voice continued. "Each life entwined with the clocks must be set free. But to do so means you must sacrifice your connection to time itself. You will lose your memories, your experiences, and the essence of who you are." A hush fell over us as we processed the weight of the decision. Could we truly sever ourselves from our past to ensure a brighter future? As the pocket watch counted down the final moments, I felt the warmth of my friend's hands in mine. "We've faced our fears together," I said, my voice steady. "Perhaps the greatest act of courage is to embrace the unknown, even if it means letting go." With a shared resolve, we nodded in agreement, ready to face the inevitable. The shadows faded into the ether, leaving us bathed in light as the pocket watch ticked down to its final second. The room fell silent as the last tick echoed through the workshop, and I braced myself for the unknown. And then, it happened. A blinding flash enveloped us, the world around us dissolving into a kaleidoscope of colors and sensations. I felt a rush of memories flooding my mind, laughter, warmth, the joy of connection, but as quickly as they came, they began to fade, like whispers carried away by the wind. With each heartbeat, I felt myself being unshackled from the burdens of my past. The faces of my friends dimmed, but their presence remained, an imprint on my soul, a reminder of the courage we had found together. As the light enveloped me, I whispered one final thought: we are more than our fears. We are the moments we choose to create. And then, darkness. A silence that felt both eternal and freeing. In that stillness, I knew I had stepped into the unknown, ready to forge a new path, one unbound by the ticking of clocks, where I could embrace the beauty of every moment yet to come. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.